They invited the black loser of the class to the 10-year reunion to mock her. Her arrival by helicopter left 300 former classmates in absolute shock. The noise was deafening. Champagne glasses trembled on the tables of the Riverside Country Club as something descended from the night sky like a vengeful apparition. The black helicopter emerged from the clouds, its rotors cutting through the air with military precision, abruptly interrupting the laughter and conversation of Connecticut's most exclusive graduation reunion. "What the hell is going on?" Blake Morrison shouted over the roar of the turbines, his Armani tuxedo fluttering in the violent wind that swept across the terrace. At his side, 3 figures froze in utter panic, the same faces that exactly 10 years ago had turned the halls of Westfield Academy into a private hell for one person. Inside the helicopter, Amara Johnson adjusted her aviator sunglasses and smiled for the first time in a decade. Not a nostalgic or nervous smile, but something fierce and calculated. At 28, she had become the youngest executive in history to run a military technology company valued at $2 billion. But no one down there had any idea who had actually accepted the invitation to that meeting. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, along with a group message on WhatsApp that Blake had forgotten to remove her name from. "Man, it's going to be hilarious to see Ghost try to fit in with normal people," wrote Madison Cooper, now an influencer with 500,000 followers. "I bet she doesn't even have money for a decent dress." Amara had read every word of that conversation. Every joke about her appearance from 10 years ago. Every bet on whether she would even show up. Every comment that confirmed that some people just don't change, no matter how many degrees hang on their walls or how many zeros appear in their bank accounts. The helicopter landed with surgical precision on the immaculate lawn, crushing ornamental flowers that probably cost more than many teachers' annual salaries. The silence that followed was louder than the roar of the turbines, 300 people caught between shock and morbid curiosity. Blake, Madison, and their 2 accomplices looked at each other with a mixture of confusion and growing terror. They had invited Amara to have fun at her expense once again. What they didn't know was that she had accepted the invitation not to fit in, but to ensure that they would never forget the name they had tried to erase from history. The helicopter door slowly opened, and an elegant figure emerged into the darkness, silhouetted against the cockpit lights. But what those privileged people didn't yet know was that every second of humiliation they had inflicted had been transformed into fuel for something much greater than their small minds could process. If you've ever been underestimated because of the color of your skin or your social background, then you know that the sweetest revenge isn't cruelty, it's absolute success. Sign up to find out how an invisible girl became the most elegant nightmare her oppressors could have created. As the helicopter stood imposing on the lawn, Amara Johnson's memories came back in sharp flashes. 10 years ago, at Westfield Academy, she was known by a cruel nickname, Ghost. Not because she was mysterious or haunted, but because Madison Cooper had decided that a poor black girl simply shouldn't exist at an elite school. "Look, Ghost is trying to speak in class again," Blake whispered during a presentation on quantum physics. Amara had prepared that presentation for weeks, but every word was accompanied by snickers and mean comments. The professor, Dr. Wellington, simply ignored the situation, as he always did. The real cruelty began when Amara received a full scholarship to MIT. Madison found out first and spread the news throughout the school with a distorted version. Of course she got in, right? Racial quotas make everything easier for these people. What no one knew was that Amara had developed, at age 17, an algorithm for optimizing air defense systems that impressed MIT professors to the point that they created a special scholarship for her. But at Westfield Academy, her genius was reduced to racial favoritism by privileged classmates who never had to fight for anything. Blake Morrison, the son of an oil tycoon, had been particularly cruel. During the graduation party, he accidentally spilled champagne on the dress that Amara had saved up for months to buy. "Sorry, Ghost, I didn't see you there," he said, laughing. "But relax, that dress was already kind of questionable anyway." The WhatsApp group that Blake had forgotten to remove her from was even worse than Amara remembered. In addition to jokes about her current appearance, there were old messages that she had screenshotted before leaving the group. "Does anyone know if Ghost still exists? I bet she's serving coffee somewhere, trying to pay off her student loans," wrote Trevor Blackstone, now a corporate lawyer. "Or better yet, maybe she dropped out of college and went back to where she came from." Madison had replied with laughing emojis. "Guys, imagine her trying to fit in here. It'll be like watching a fish out of water trying to swim in champagne." The message had 15 laughing reactions from her former classmates. What they didn't know was that Amara had read these messages while sitting in her panoramic office at the top of one of Manhattan's most expensive skyscrapers. Her company, DefenseNet Technologies, had just signed an $800 million contract with the Pentagon to modernize anti-aircraft systems. The same algorithm she had developed at age 17 now protected American military bases on 3 continents. But what hurt the most weren't the jokes about her current success. It was the memory of that 18-year-old girl who cried alone in her dorm room after every humiliation. The same girl who almost gave up everything when she found out that Blake had spread rumors that she was pushing professors to get better grades. Amara's strength didn't come out of nowhere. It was forged every night she studied until 4 a.m. to prove she deserved to be there, every time she was looked down on in the hallways, every time she was the only black person in the room and felt the weight of representing an entire race in the eyes of others. The helicopter she had just stepped out of cost $15 million and was a personal purchase, not a business one. She had learned to fly it herself, yet another hobby for someone with unlimited resources. But those people on the terrace still saw her as the scared girl from 10 years ago. Trevor, Madison, and Blake hesitantly approached the lawn, still processing the surreal scene. "Amara," Madison said, forcing a smile. "Wow, what a dramatic entrance. You've always been theatrical, haven't you?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she maintained the pose of an influencer accustomed to controlling narratives. "Yeah man, that's crazy," Blake agreed, laughing nervously. "Like, where did that helicopter come from? Is it rented? It must have cost a fortune just to impress the crowd." He looked around, hoping other colleagues would agree with his theory that this was just a desperate show. What those 3 didn't realize was that every dismissive word, every attempt to diminish the moment, was being recorded by the helicopter's own security systems. Nor did they know that Amara had spent the last few months gathering evidence of every prejudiced comment, every problematic post, every questionable business decision they had made over the years. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside her that her oppressors couldn't see, a silent force fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat, and the execution of that sentence was about to begin in a way none of them could have imagined. Amara hadn't chosen that reunion out of nostalgia. 3 months ago, when the invitation arrived along with those cruel messages on WhatsApp, she made a decision that would forever change the lives of Blake, Madison, and Trevor. But first, she needed professional help. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Marcus Chun, her private investigator and former FBI agent, sitting in Amara's panoramic office in Manhattan. Scattered across the glass table were photographs, financial reports, and screenshots that painted a devastating picture of her 3 former colleagues. "They haven't changed a bit, Marcus," Amara replied, leafing through the dossier on Blake Morrison. "Just look at this. Systematic racial discrimination at his company. 15 labor lawsuits filed with million-dollar settlements to cover up scandals. And this message he sent last week to the investor group." Marcus read the intercepted conversation. "Guys, be careful with these diverse companies. You know how it is. Affirmative action and quotas can create dangerous bubbles in the market. Go for more traditional CEOs." "He has no idea that DefenseNet Technologies is his company," Amara smiled. "My holding company controls 40% of Morrison Petroleum shares through offshore subsidiaries. Technically, I've been his boss for 2 years." The dossier on Madison Cooper revealed something even worse. Her career as an influencer was built on a foundation of tax fraud, fake products, and disguised racist campaigns. "Look at her campaign on natural African beauty," Marcus said, showing screenshots. She sold products that promised to naturally lighten black women's skin. The slogan was "your improved version." "Disgusting," Amara muttered. "What about Trevor?" "Trevor Blackstone is the worst of them all." Marcus opened another file. "A corporate lawyer specializing in shielding companies from discrimination lawsuits. Over the past 5 years, he has defended 23 cases of systematic racism and won them all using legal loopholes. Look at this recording we got." Trevor's voice echoed through the office. "It's not a matter of being racist, it's legal strategy. You hire 2 or 3 black employees in visible positions, document everything, and that's it, total protection against discrimination lawsuits. They become your human shields." Amara felt the familiar anger rising in her chest, but now she had the power to turn that anger into action. For 10 years, she had quietly built an empire, waiting for the right moment. DefenseNet Technologies wasn't just a military technology company, it was a network of influence that reached from the Pentagon to the country's largest corporations. Marcus, I want you to send this information to 3 specific people, Amara said, typing on her tablet. First, Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's investigating fraud in military contracts. Second, New York Federal Prosecutor's Office, Financial Crimes Division. Third, CNN, that investigative journalist, Sarah Mitchell. You want to destroy them before the meeting even happens? Marcus asked, confused. No, Amara smiled for the second time that day. I want them to arrive at the meeting still feeling powerful and secure. The fall has to be in public, in front of everyone who watched them humiliate me. Schedule the reports to be delivered at exactly 10 p.m. this Friday. While Marcus organized the documents, Amara remembered the phone call she had made the week before. Captain Sarah Williams, her former Navy flight instructor, now worked as a security consultant for high-profile events. I need you at my class reunion, Amara had said. Not as security, but as a witness. And bring 3 other officers in uniform. I want them to see exactly what I've become. Are you sure, Commander? Sarah always used Amara's military rank. This is going to be very dramatic. Sarah, they called me a ghost for 4 years. They said I would never be anything. It's time they found out that ghosts sometimes come back to haunt those who created them. Amara's plan had 3 phases. First, arrive in a way that no one could ignore. The helicopter would ensure that. Second, let them publicly reveal who they really were. The helicopter's security cameras were already recording every contemptuous word. Third, systematically reveal every crime, every fraud, every act of discrimination they had committed over the years. There's one more thing, Marcus said, hesitating. I got access to their cell phones through a legal investigation my ex-partner at the FBI is conducting. They haven't stopped sending offensive messages. Blake bet $5,000 that you'd arrive by bus, wearing something from the thrift store. Madison did a live stream yesterday mocking people who pretend to be important to impress former colleagues. Perfect, Amara said. I want every word documented. When all this blows up, I want there to be no doubt about their character. Her plan wasn't just about personal revenge. For a decade, Amara had used her influence to fund scholarships for black youth at elite schools, create technology mentoring programs, and invest in minority-led startups. She turned every dollar she earned into a weapon against systemic discrimination. Marcus, one last thing. After the complaints are filed, I want you to leak to the press that DefenseNet Technologies is suspending all contracts with companies that have a history of discrimination. That will include Morrison Petroleum and Trevor's firm's top clients. That will affect millions in contracts, Marcus noted. Exactly, Amara stood up, looking out the window at the city that had once rejected her. They're going to find out that the invisible girl they humiliated now controls a significant portion of the economy that sustains them. What Blake, Madison, and Trevor didn't know was that every laugh, every insult, every attempt to belittle her over all these years had been noted, documented, and turned into fuel for a plan for justice that took a decade to execute. And the most ironic thing was that they themselves had provided the final evidence by underestimating her once again at that meeting. As Amara watched the movement of the city below, a cold smile formed on her lips. For years they had called her a ghost, someone who didn't exist, who didn't matter. But tonight they would discover that some ghosts return not to haunt, but to execute a justice that no court could provide, the justice of truth revealed at the exact time and place where it all began. Amara stepped out of the helicopter with the elegance of someone born to command attention. There was no haste in her movements, no nervousness in her posture. At 28, she wore a tailored military blazer that cost more than the cars of many people at the meeting, but what really caught the eye were the military patches on her chest and the absolute confidence radiating from her every gesture. Captain Sarah Williams stepped out behind her, followed by 3 more officers in impeccable U.S. Navy uniforms. The formation was not casual. It was a visual statement of respect and hierarchy that no one there could ignore. Blake Morrison, Madison Cooper, Trevor Blackstone, Amara said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. She didn't shout, she didn't need to. Authority doesn't need volume. Good to see you all here. Just as I planned. Blake tried to regain his composure, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Amara. Man, what an epic entrance. You've always been dramatic, haven't you? Where did you get that helicopter? It must have cost a fortune to rent just to impress us. Rent. Amara laughed for the first time that night, but there was no joy in that sound. Blake, this helicopter was a personal purchase. Cash. It cost $15 million, roughly the amount your company will lose in the next 6 months. What are you talking about? Madison interjected, recording with her cell phone, trying to control the narrative. Guys, look at this. Amara is pretending to be rich to impress us. How cute. Captain Williams approached. Excuse me, miss. Lieutenant Commander Ashby isn't pretending anything. She's the CEO of DefenseNet Technologies, one of the largest military technology companies in the country. You may have heard of them. She just closed an $800 million deal with the Pentagon. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison slowly lowered her phone. Blake blinked several times as if trying to process the information, and Trevor instinctively took a step back. Impossible, Trevor whispered. You were the ghost. Amara finished. Yeah, I was. But ghosts have an interesting characteristic, Trevor. They observe everything, store everything, and when they return, they bring truths that no one wants to face. She gestured to Captain Williams, who handed her a tablet. Let me tell you some interesting truths I've collected about you over the past few years. Blake, do you remember when you told your investors to avoid non-traditional CEOs? Blake's face paled. Where did you get that? Legal interception authorized by the FBI, Amara replied casually. It turns out that systematic discrimination is a federal crime. But here's the really interesting part. My holding company has controlled 40% of Morrison Petroleum shares for 2 years. Technically, you work for me. Blake stumbled backward as if he had been physically punched. You're lying. Amara held her tablet up to the crowd that had gathered around them. Public records, Blake. Perfectly legal offshore subsidiaries. Riverside Holdings, Cascade Investments, Pacific Defense Capital, all mine. And all with majority stakes in your company. The murmurs of the crowd intensified. People began taking photos, recording videos. Power had changed hands so quickly that some still couldn't process it. Madison, Amara continued, shifting her target with surgical precision. Your Natural African Beauty campaign. Products that promise to lighten black women's skin. Slogan, your improved version. I have screenshots of everything. The algorithm suggested, Madison stammered, sweating visibly. The algorithm? Amara laughed genuinely this time. You recorded videos personally explaining why black women needed to improve their appearance. I have 47 hours of documented content, Madison. And the federal prosecutor's office has had a copy since this afternoon. Madison's cell phone rang. Then Blake's. Then Trevor's. All at once, like an apocalyptic symphony. It's 10 p.m., Amara noted, glancing at her military watch. Right on schedule. Captain Williams, can you explain to my former colleagues what is happening to their phones? Captain Williams assumed an official tone. At 10 p.m. tonight, formal complaints were delivered to the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, and the national press documenting crimes of systematic racial discrimination, tax fraud, and civil rights violations. All 3 are under formal investigation. Trevor, who had remained quiet, finally exploded. You can't do that. I'm a lawyer, I know the law better than anyone here. Trevor Blackstone, Amara said, her voice turning icy. Expert at shielding companies from racial discrimination lawsuits using human shields. Your words, not mine. I have recordings of you explaining how to hire a few black people in visible positions to create legal shielding. The Bar Association received a complete copy 30 minutes ago. Trevor tried to speak, but no sound came out. His career, built on systematically exploiting legal loopholes to perpetuate corporate racism, had ended in a single sentence. But wait, Amara said, raising her hand. The most interesting part is yet to come. She gestured to one of the officers, who brought a second folder. DefenseNet Technologies is suspending all contracts with companies that have a proven history of discrimination. That includes Morrison Petroleum and the 23 major clients of Trevor's firm. Blake finally grasped the magnitude of the disaster. You're destroying us financially. No, Blake. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented the process and publicly revealed who you always were. The difference is that now you have to face the consequences. Captain Williams waved to the crowd around her. For those who don't know, Lieutenant Commander Ashby was awarded the Navy Cross for exceptional valor in combat. She led rescue missions in hostile zones and saved 23 American service members in high-risk operations. Military Cross? Whispered someone in the crowd. That's one of the highest American military honors. Third highest, corrected Captain Williams. Second only to the Medal of Honor and the Distinguished Service Cross. The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. People who moments before had been watching with curiosity now looked at Amara with genuine respect. Some veterans in attendance instinctively saluted. Madison made one last desperate attempt. This is all absurd. She's trying to destroy us because she couldn't get through high school. Holding a grudge for 10 years. Amara approached Madison, her presence suddenly intimidating. Madison, you have a point. I have held some things against you for 10 years. For example, remember when you said I'd never amount to anything because people like me weren't meant to win? Madison backed away, but Amara continued, those words motivated me during every hour of study at MIT, every night working in military labs, every rescue mission where the lives of others depended on my competence. You're right, I never forgot. But, Amara smiled for the last time that night, I turned every insult from you into fuel for something greater. Today, my company employs 3,000 people, 60% of whom are women and minorities. I fund 200 full scholarships for young black people at elite schools. And last year, I donated more money to social causes than the three of you have earned in your entire lives. The silence was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped to listen. Blake, Madison, and Trevor were devastated. Their careers destroyed, their reputations ruined, their businesses dismantled. In a single night, the girl they had tried to erase from existence had revealed herself to be the most powerful force in their lives, and their destruction. Captain Williams, we're ready to go, Amara said, handing back the tablet. As she walked toward the helicopter, she paused and turned one last time. Oh, and Blake? That invitation you sent me as a joke? It was the best favor you ever did me. Because it gave me the perfect opportunity to show 300 people exactly who you've always been. The rotors began to spin again, but this time no one complained about the noise. Everyone watched in reverential silence as Amara Johnson, former Ghost, now one of the most powerful executives in the country, disappeared into the night sky. Blake, Madison, and Trevor remained on the lawn, still processing the magnitude of their defeat. All around them, former colleagues avoided them as if moral bankruptcy were contagious. In a single night, they had lost everything they considered important: money, status, respect, and future. But worst of all was knowing that every consequence they would face from now on would be a direct result of choices they had consciously and systematically made over the years. There was no injustice in their downfall, only justice finally being served by the person they had most underestimated. And as the sirens of the press began to echo in the distance, everyone there knew that this night would go down in history not as a class reunion, but as the moment when one of the most perfectly executed acts of revenge of the decade was served with the elegance and precision of someone who had turned every scar into a weapon of justice. 6 months later, Blake Morrison declared personal bankruptcy. Morrison Petroleum lost 73% of its government contracts when DefenseNet suspended all business with discriminatory companies. He now works as an insurance salesman in a small town, far from the spotlight he loved so much. Madison Cooper lost her 500,000 followers in a week when recordings of her racist comments were leaked. Her advertising partnerships were canceled, lawsuits piled up, and she was forced to sell her Manhattan apartment. Today she works in a coffee shop, using a false name to avoid recognition. Trevor Blackstone was disbarred and faces criminal charges for facilitating systematic discrimination. No firm will hire him, and he survives by doing minor consulting work for small companies unaware of his past. Meanwhile, Amara Johnson was on the cover of Fortune magazine as Executive of the Year, her scholarship program expanded to 50 American universities, and DefenseNet closed the largest military technology contract in history, $2.4 billion. Captain Williams visited her in her new office, an entire floor in One World Trade Center. You did it, Commander. Not only did you get revenge, you changed the entire system. Revenge was just the first step, Sarah, Amara replied, looking out the window at the city that once rejected her. The real power lies in ensuring that other children like me never go through what I went through. On the wall of her office, framed, was a photo from the meeting 10 years ago, specifically the moment when Blake, Madison, and Trevor realized they had lost everything. Not out of sadism, but as a reminder that underestimated people can become the most powerful forces in the world. Amara had proven that the best revenge is not to destroy your enemies, it is to build something so great that they become irrelevant. Every scar they tried to leave on her became fuel for an empire that now protected thousands of others like her. The little ghost girl they tried to erase from history had become one of the most influential executives in America. And the most ironic part? The three who despised her the most now lived as shadows of their former selves, while she shone brighter than they ever dreamed possible. If you've ever been underestimated or suffered prejudice, remember, turn every insult into motivation, every no into determination. Resounding success is always the most elegant revenge. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that he who laughs last, laughs best.